Imagine walking into a Ferrari dealership with $500,000 ready to spend. You've built a successful business. You have the money. You've waited years for this moment. But instead of handing you the keys, Ferrari tells you no, not because you can't afford the car, not because they've sold out, because they simply don't want to sell it to you. In almost every industry, that sounds like business suicide. Companies spend billions trying to attract more customers. They offer discounts, limited time promotions, loyalty rewards, and financing deals, all with one goal: sell as much as possible. Ferrari chose a completely different path. Instead of asking, how can we sell more cars? It asked a far more powerful question: how do we make people want them even more? That single shift in thinking transformed Ferrari from a sports car manufacturer into one of the most valuable luxury brands in the world. Today, there are companies that produce more powerful cars, companies that produce more advanced technology, companies that manufacture far more vehicles every year. Yet, almost none of them create the same emotional reaction as a Ferrari. Because Ferrari isn't just selling transportation, it isn't even selling performance. Ferrari is selling access, the feeling that ownership is reserved for a select few, and that feeling didn't happen by accident. For decades, Ferrari has intentionally produced fewer cars than it could sell. It has turned away willing buyers, protected waiting lists, rewarded loyalty over wealth. And in doing so, it discovered something that most businesses never understand. Sometimes the fastest way to increase demand is to make your product harder to obtain. The result is a business strategy so unusual that it seems to break every traditional rule of growth. Yet, year after year, it continues to make Ferrari stronger. Because the company understands a truth that reaches far beyond the automotive industry. People rarely obsess over what's easy to have. They obsess over what feels just out of reach. And that's exactly where Ferrari has chosen to stay. At first glance, Ferrari's strategy seems almost irrational. Imagine owning a restaurant with customers lined up around the block, then deciding to leave half the tables empty every night. Or running a luxury hotel during peak season while intentionally keeping rooms vacant. Most executives would call that lost revenue. Ferrari calls it protecting the brand. Every year, demand for Ferrari vehicles exceeds the number of cars the company chooses to build. It isn't because Ferrari lacks the factories, engineers, or financial resources to increase production. The company has repeatedly made it clear that exclusivity is more valuable than maximizing volume. That decision changes everything. Most manufacturers measure success by one number: how many units they sell. Ferrari measures something different: how badly people want the next one. To most businesses, every customer who leaves empty-handed represents a missed opportunity. To Ferrari, that same customer becomes proof that the brand remains special. The waiting list isn't a flaw in the system, it is part of the system. Every month a buyer waits builds anticipation. Every rumor about allocations makes ownership feel more significant. By the time many customers finally receive their Ferrari, they aren't simply buying a car, they're fulfilling a dream they've been chasing for years. But scarcity alone isn't enough. Anyone can manufacture fewer products. What Ferrari built is something far more powerful. It built a hierarchy. Buying your first Ferrari might get you through the front door. Buying your second or third begins to unlock entirely different opportunities. Some of Ferrari's rarest models aren't advertised publicly at all. They're quietly offered to customers who have demonstrated years of loyalty, built strong relationships with dealerships, and shown genuine appreciation for the brand. In other words, the question isn't always, can you afford it? It's, have you earned it? That completely changes the relationship between buyer and seller. Instead of Ferrari competing for customers, customers compete for Ferrari. The company also understands that exclusivity doesn't end once the keys change hands. Owners who genuinely enjoy and preserve their cars often strengthen their relationship with the brand over time. Long-term loyalty can open doors that money alone cannot. Even customization has limits. Ferrari offers an extraordinary range of colors, materials, and bespoke details. But if a request conflicts with the identity of the brand, Ferrari has been willing to say no. That may sound surprising. After all, if someone is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, shouldn't they be allowed to order whatever they want? Ferrari believes the brand itself is worth protecting, even from its own customers. Every decision points back to the same philosophy: scarcity, consistency, control. Because Ferrari understands something many companies never do, the moment something becomes ordinary, people stop dreaming about it. And Ferrari has spent nearly 8 decades making sure that never happens. Ferrari's greatest product isn't a car, it's desire. That may sound strange for a company that builds some of the fastest machines on Earth. But if Ferrari were simply selling horsepower, there are plenty of competitors that could challenge it. If it were only selling engineering, other manufacturers produce extraordinary technology. And if it were just about price, there are cars that cost even more. So why does Ferrari continue to occupy a place in people's imaginations that few brands ever reach? Because Ferrari understands something fundamental about human nature. People don't simply want valuable things, they want things that are difficult to obtain. Imagine two watches sitting side by side. They perform exactly the same. They're made from the same materials, they tell the same time. The only difference is that one can be purchased in almost any jewelry store, while the other is limited to 100 pieces worldwide. Which one feels more valuable? For most people, the answer is immediate, the rare one. Not because it's more useful, because it's more exclusive. Psychologists call this the scarcity effect. When something becomes less available, our brains naturally assign it greater value. It's an instinct that's been part of human behavior for thousands of years. Scarce resources once meant survival. If something was difficult to obtain, it was probably worth pursuing. Our modern lives may be very different. But our brains still respond in much the same way. Ferrari doesn't fight that instinct, it embraces it. But Ferrari goes one step further. It doesn't just make its cars scarce, it makes ownership feel selective. There's a subtle but important difference. Scarcity says, there aren't enough. Selectivity says, not everyone gets one. That small shift transforms a purchase into something much more emotional. Because rejection has an interesting effect on people. Often it doesn't reduce desire, it intensifies it. We've all experienced it. The sold-out concert, the members-only club, the invitation you didn't receive, the opportunity that slipped away. The moment something feels exclusive, it suddenly becomes more interesting. Ferrari has built an entire business around that principle. But exclusivity isn't only about owning something rare, it's about what that rarity communicates. Throughout history, status has opened doors, not because expensive objects have magical powers, but because they quietly signal achievement, access, and belonging. Luxury products become symbols. They tell a story without saying a word. That's why Ferrari means something different than simply driving an expensive car. Many vehicles cost just as much. Some cost considerably more. But price alone doesn't create prestige. Availability destroys it. If anyone with enough money could walk into a dealership tomorrow and immediately drive home in Ferrari's most desirable model, part of the magic would disappear, because what people admire isn't only the machine, it's what the machine represents. Behavioral economists call this signaling. Every purchase communicates something. A practical sedan might signal reliability. A pickup truck might signal utility. A Ferrari signals something entirely different. It signals access. It suggests that the owner belongs to a world that remains out of reach for most people. And Ferrari carefully strengthens that feeling long before anyone ever starts the engine. The anticipation, the waiting, The phone calls, the uncertainty, the invitation, every step increases emotional investment. By the time the customer finally receives the keys, they're not simply buying a car, they're completing a journey. That's one reason Ferrari's strategy is so difficult to copy. Any company can reduce production, any company can raise prices, but creating genuine desire takes decades. It requires patience, consistency, discipline, and the willingness to protect a reputation instead of chasing short-term sales. Ferrari didn't invent human psychology, it simply built one of the world's most successful businesses around it. Because in the end, people rarely remember specifications, they remember how something made them feel. And for nearly 80 years, Ferrari has perfected one feeling above all else: wanting. If Ferrari's strategy only worked for sports cars, it wouldn't be very interesting, but it doesn't. The real lesson has almost nothing to do with automobiles. It's about discipline. In today's business world, growth is often treated as the ultimate goal. More customers, more locations, more products, more revenue. Quarter after quarter, companies are expected to expand, and many do. But somewhere along the way, growth quietly becomes the priority instead of the mission. Ferrari chose a different path. The company understands that every decision to increase sales comes with a cost. Build too many cars and exclusivity begins to disappear. Offer discounts and customers start questioning the true value of the product. Say yes to every buyer, and eventually the privilege of ownership becomes ordinary. Ferrari has spent decades resisting those temptations, because once a luxury brand loses its mystique, it's incredibly difficult to get it back. History is filled with companies that chased short-term revenue at the expense of long-term value. Some expanded too quickly, others licensed their name onto countless products. Many enjoyed temporary success, but over time they became easier to find and easier to forget. Ferrari understood that protecting the brand would ultimately become more valuable than maximizing production. That discipline created something every company wants: pricing power. When demand consistently exceeds supply, discounts become unnecessary. Customers aren't negotiating from a position of strength. They know someone else is already waiting behind them. The market begins reinforcing the value of the product without the company having to convince anyone. But perhaps Ferrari's greatest achievement isn't creating scarcity, it's creating trust. Owners trust that their Ferrari will remain rare. Collectors trust that the brand won't sacrifice decades of reputation for a few years of higher sales. Future buyers trust that the feeling of seeing a Ferrari on the road will still be special years from now. That kind of trust can't be built through advertising. It has to be earned, year after year, decision after decision. Sometimes by turning away opportunities that look profitable in the moment. Because Ferrari understands something many businesses struggle to accept. Not every sale makes a brand stronger. Sometimes. The most valuable sale is the one you never make. That's a difficult philosophy to embrace. It requires patience when competitors are expanding, confidence when investors demand faster growth, and the willingness to think in decades instead of quarters. Very few companies have the discipline to do that. Ferrari built its entire identity around it. And perhaps that's why, after nearly 80 years, the company isn't simply admired for the cars it builds. It's admired for the opportunities it refuses. Because real luxury isn't defined by abundance, it's defined by restraint. And in business, restraint may be the rarest competitive advantage of all. The irony is almost poetic. Most companies spend their entire existence trying to become more accessible. Ferrari spent decades becoming less accessible, and somehow, that made the brand even more desirable. Because the things people value most are rarely the easiest to obtain, they're the things that require patience, commitment, persistence, sometimes even rejection. In the end, Ferrari isn't refusing to sell everyone a car because it dislikes customers. It's protecting something far more valuable than a single sale, a feeling. The feeling that seeing a Ferrari is still an event, that owning one is still an achievement, that some things in a world built around instant gratification remain genuinely difficult to earn. And that's what makes Ferrari so fascinating. It isn't just a company that manufactures sports cars, it's a company that manufactures desire. Every waiting list, every declined customization, every limited production run, every invitation-only model, they all serve the same purpose: to remind the world that not everything should be available to everyone. It's a lesson that extends far beyond the automotive industry. Whether you're building a business, creating a product, or even building a personal brand, value isn't determined solely by quality. It's determined by perception, by consistency, by trust, and by having the discipline to protect what makes you different. Ferrari could almost certainly sell more cars tomorrow. It has the factories, the engineers, the demand. But it also understands something many companies learn too late. Growth without discipline eventually destroys the very thing that made people care in the first place. Perhaps that's Ferrari's greatest invention, not the V12 engine, not decades of racing success, not even the cars themselves. Its greatest invention is a business model built on the confidence to say no when everyone else is saying yes. Because in a world where almost everything can be ordered with a single click, true rarity has become one of the most valuable products on Earth. And that's why Ferrari isn't just one of the world's most successful car companies, it's one of the world's greatest branding masterclasses. The companies that people remember forever aren't always the ones that sell to everyone. Sometimes, they're the ones with the courage to leave people wanting more,